sense yet? If we get low on coffee, you're just.
So I do not need to be on the. Sure.
Good morning, Joshua. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, you can. They can hear me. It's amazing.
I'm trying to hear all that. That's good.
Curly hair? I don't know. Mask, curly hair.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I tried to get my computer to go, but somehow saying the speakers aren't working. I guess that's what happens when you try to do it to set up this computer first thing in the morning. So I'm gonna do it by the phone, guys.
All right.
Well, Gabe, maybe you should set it up at night, man. Hello, Joshua. Keith Berthold.
Hi, Keith. I'm Josh. I'm with Eldorado Park. Nice to meet you.
You too. Welcome.
Hi, Josh. It's nice to meet you.
Good morning, Esther.
How long have you been with Eldorado Park?
Well, I've been working with Jackie for
Oh, now I
about
can't
10
hear you.
years.
Hold on. Hold on, Josh. It disconnected. Oh, hold on.
Well, that means you're a survivor.
Ah, indeed.
I don't like it's like disconnecting and connecting. Is it? It's not trying to connect to your computer, is it?
No, we can hear you now.
Yeah, I just have speaker or off on this thing now.
So do you have to listen? Like, can you only hear everybody?
So we're trying to
Talk and see if they can hear you well.
Can you hear me well? Actually, here. How is the audio from here?
Not too
I can hear you.
Yeah, let's try that.
You can hear, okay.
Because you don't have both. I don't know. Okay, they can hear you well. Let's just do
You
that.
want your coffee?
Yeah.
We're gonna wait a few more minutes to let a few more people join. What was that? I should have, I think I forwarded it to your Gmail address from Andy this morning. You and I, neither of us have it. And he emailed everybody except us. We were not invited this morning.
I emailed
to this
everyone
event.
registered, and since you guys did register, I didn't.
Good morning, Jan, Kyle. Let's see, Crystal, Gabe, Keith. Let's see if I got everybody.
Good morning.
Somebody else is joining. Marcy, good to see you this morning.
You signed up last night? I signed up last night. Okay, I emailed you this morning. Okay, I don't remember which email address I used. A student.
Student from
President Pacific. Yeah.
And our Wi-Fi is, right. Sorry. We'll see that.
The A and S are caps.
Okay.
I learned.
Yes.
By trial and error. I'm still turning it on the internet, so I don't know. So.
We're gonna wait just a few more minutes and then we'll get started. This is our first attempt at doing a both and event today. So we have a few people live and in person today. And then we have a group online on Zoom. So you can help us at the end with some feedback to make sure we are engaging both audiences and how that's going. Because I'm sure we're all trying to figure out if we can do this as organizations with donors or whatnot. So.
So let's turn Bluetooth off on the phone. Yeah, because I'm gonna.
Disconnect. Okay. Hi, come on up. Okay, Jan, were you saying something? You're on mute. I can't hear you. You're muted.
I wasn't saying it out loud before. Good luck in making this work, because I have tried a couple of times with limited success.
Okay.
But I bet you can pull it off. Confidence.
We have confidence.
Yep.
For those of you on Zoom, here's our working room today. We have a few people here. Andy's at the end of the table. She's going to be working on making sure everybody has what's on the screen is what we're talking about. Did everyone receive an email this morning with the links? If you did not receive that email, please shoot in the chat Andy a message and let her know so she can get that to you. I think she's putting it in the comments too. Right, Andy?
The Google Doc that I need, yes, instead.
Okay. So there's a Google folder that we're going to be accessing today. And there is a ton of information in there. So we're going to be walking through several of the different documents and folders and whatnot in that. And so you will need access to that. You probably will at some point just minimize your Zoom screen so you don't need to see us. You can hear us, and then you'll just work on your Google Docs. We're hoping this is very, very helpful for everybody in actually getting some work done today and not just listening to Esther or Kelsey talk. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself, and we'll do a little round of introductions. And then we'll kick off because I'm sure some other people are going to join us later, and we're recording. So sorry for those watching the recording later, because now you're watching 5 minutes in and nothing has happened. And Andy's going to edit it, so we're good. So good morning. Welcome to the Lowell CDC office. We are super excited to be here. This is like maybe the second time we've actually had other people in our office since being here. The third time, actually. No, it's the third time. So welcome everyone, and thank you. I'm Esther. I'm the director of Lowell CDC. And then today I'm going to have Kelsey Kelsey, why don't you just step up here to introduce yourself? Kelsey's with us today, also presenting. Here. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kelsey McVeigh. I am on the board for the Lowell CDC. I've also had the pleasure of working with Keith at Fresno Metro Ministry. I currently work at Fresno EOC as the Resource Development Manager. I'm really happy to be here this morning with all of you. I see some familiar faces and some great new ones. So looking forward to getting to know you more and sharing what we know, and also hearing from some of the other experienced people on this call about great tools and tricks that they've developed over the years for grant writing. So thank you.
Okay, a few housekeeping things. If you're here in the room this morning, we have refreshments, we have coffee. Please help yourself. There's bathrooms there. If you don't feel like going to the bathroom in the same room where we're all at, there is also bathrooms downstairs. So
There's a door, don't worry.
I mean, there's doors. It's just right there. So you do whatever works for you. I think a few more people will join us this morning. Our Wi-Fi codes are floating around, so If you need help, ask Vicencia, she's on staff. Yeah, so we're really grateful for all of you being here and all of you online being here this morning too. Andy, do you want to just, or I think can everybody here in the room from here? If you all introduce yourselves, everyone introduces themselves from online so we can have input.
We're talking in the chat.
Oh, perfect. So people are introducing themselves in the chat?
Mhm.
Okay. So there's not a need to like go around the room on Zoom. I am super impressed. We have like a bunch of different organizations here today. So would it be helpful for you or you good?
Maybe just real quick, name an organization.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you can, let's unmute yourself, give your name and your organization. That would be super helpful for the rest of us.
I'll go first. I'm Marcy Santana. I'm with Saints Rest Community Economic Development Corporation. Good morning, everyone.
I'm Jan Minami, AMI Concepts. I'm a consultant that works with business districts like Chinatown and downtown Kingsburg, downtown Selma, various others.
I'm Keith Bergthold with Fresno Metro Ministry, Better Blackstone and Food to Share. And I'm a former associate of Jan's until we connect on a new work project, right? Jan, can you put your email in the chat, please, Jan?
I'll go.
Christian, go ahead.
Everyone, Christian Gonzalez, Better Blackstone. Good to see you, Kelsey.
Hi, Crystal with Jane Addams, CDC.
I'm Joshua Carey with Eldorado Park CDC.
I'm Kyle Lopez-Schmidt with South Tower Trust, the Tower Community Alliance, and I'm also Senior Manager Administration at Access Plus Capital. So I do a lot of our grant writing over here.
Good morning, everyone. Gabriel Lozano, Program Manager for CEPSEDA.
Okay. And then I'll have the people in the room here just go around real quickly. Sorry if the audio is not great, but we have, you wanna wave? Introduce yourself. Oh, yeah. I don't know if the audio's gonna be crazy, but yeah.
Good morning. Oh, yeah, it's gonna be crazy.
Just say it loudly.
Yeah. Good morning. This is Vicencia Abundis. I am the Community Outreach Coordinator for Lowell CDC.
We can move around. Here we go. This works.
Hi, my name is Lana Grudo. I'm a student at Fresno Pacific in the CLT program, and I'm interning with FACE this semester, so I am here with them.
Hi there, Lauren, Fresno Area Community Enterprises.
Hi there, Tower Community CDC.
What's your name?
Nicole.
And Andy?
I think I know you all. I'm Andy with Fresno CEDP. So this group right here.
Yeah. You want to introduce yourself?
Love to. Hey, I'm Hector.
Hi, Hector.
Representative for the Hidalgo CDC.
Nice. Welcome. Awesome. So I'm sure we'll have a few more joining us. Thank you all for being here this morning. Andy, do you want to go ahead and share the agenda or screen share the agenda this morning? And we'll just get started. So what we're kind of going to cover today, Kelsey and I are going to tag team this, and I am going to go over kind of as an organization, how can you have a system for your organization, for your staff, that will organize your grants. What grants do you want to apply for? How do you figure out, which ones are due when and what's required for each grant? And then when you get down to actually grant writing, what goes into each grant. Each grant is different. They all require attachments and narratives and budgets. And so it's a lot of work. If you don't, it's a lot of work, period. And my brain is full of a lot of different things on a daily basis. And so spreadsheets have been very helpful for me for organizing all the different elements. And so I'm gonna go through some just like, how do you organize this stuff? How do you keep stuff on track? So we've come up with some tools. I have a system that works for me and for the Lowell CDC. It's not very pretty. So Andy has helped us make our system a little prettier with some templates that we're going to share with you all today. And you guys got the Google Drive folder, okay? There's templates in there. So I would recommend that you, first thing this morning, you're going to create a copy of that folder into your own drive, okay? So then that drive folder becomes yours. And only you can see it, or whoever you want to share it with can see it at that point. And you can start editing those documents in there to become yours for your organization, for your projects, for your group of people, okay? So that's how we're going to work on it so that you're not editing the template that we've put in the shared folder. So just create a copy of the folder. Andy, it's possible to create a copy of the folder, not just a copy of the documents, right?
Yes.
I've had a problem with that. Sometimes I've had problems before copying an entire folder.
Yeah, you know what? You're not gonna be able to do that.
So
You're gonna have to make a folder and then copy
Okay.
each of
So-
those things and move it to that folder.
So in this screen share, go down to the last page of the agenda, my little, my picture there of my flow chart. There we go. Okay, so here is how I do it for my organization. So I create in my drive a folder named grants. Okay, I have one folder named grants. Then in that folder, I create separate folders for each year. So I have 2021, I have 2020. I have it going back clear to 2016, okay? So I have 2016 through 2020 as folders in the grants folder. So it's very clean. I know exactly like where I'm gonna find something. If I applied for it in a year, it's gonna be in that year, okay? So create a grants folder, then create a year folder. So you're just gonna start with 2021 right now, okay? Then in your year folder is where we're gonna be working today. So that's where you want to drop in or save to the documents that Andy and I have created and Kelsey. Then you're gonna open those documents, save a copy to your grants 2021 folder, and then you're gonna have your templates, okay? So this morning, we're gonna start with kind of our general info. That's the grant, yeah. So in my 2021 folder, I'm gonna have both my grants tracking folder, and then I'm gonna have individual grant folders. So it's gonna start getting big, okay? So I'm going to apply for 5 grants in 2021, okay? So I'm gonna have 5 different folders in 2021. Each grant's gonna have its own folder. I'm also gonna have a spreadsheet in there. That's my grant tracking. Good morning, welcome, come on in. And I'm gonna have general grant info in there, okay? You can have general grant info. You need to update it every year, so I would recommend having it in your 2021 folder. Because next year, that general grant info, you're gonna create a copy of that for your 2022, and you're gonna have to update information, okay? Because some of the information in there is gonna get updated annually. Okay, so let's go to the master grant tracking list, Andy. Okay, here's one of the first templates. This is kind of how do I organize all of my grants and figure out what I'm gonna apply for, when I'm gonna apply for it, and where I am in the process for it, okay? How does it fit into my overall budget, all of that kind of stuff, okay? So here is a template for you guys. You guys can change this. I threw in some like faux information here. So none of the information on here is actually correct. So don't try and take this and apply for these grants, okay? Because it's not real information. But this is a template. This is how you would use this. So my grant tracking right now, I think has 5 different grants on it. 3 of which I have already applied for, 1 of which I'm going to apply for, and 1 of which I'm like trying to figure out the due date for it, if we have enough resources as a team to apply for it, all that kind of stuff. But as I'm researching grants, this is where I'm sticking them, okay? So we have it broken up into operational grants and program grants. You can have other kinds of grants on here too. You get to decide, okay? But most of our grants are gonna be for a project or a program that we have. And then there's just general operating, which is really nice and kind of hard to come by. But we have kind of seen more of these grants come up recently, okay? Like our Kresge grants that were available to a lot of the CEDQ members. General operating, super nice, okay? So you're gonna put on there what the grant name is sometimes different than the actual funder, okay? So you're gonna put, what's the grant name? You're gonna put the funder on there. You're gonna put how much this is gonna be, how much the grant amount is for. And then all the important dates. When is this grant due by? When are the, like what's the grant period, okay? When are your final reports gonna be due? All of that kind of stuff. Also, most grants now we're applying for online. Okay, so you're gonna have a website where you're gonna get your grant information. You're also gonna have some sort of login information for that grant. So this template is literally like you need to add columns to it to make it work for you and all the grant information that you have. But you can store everything that you need to know about all your grants in one place so that it's not like, oh, I saw something about a grant. I literally saw something on Instagram about a grant the other day. And so it's hard, like when I'm on my phone and scrolling Instagram and I was like, oh, this could work for us. And so I was able to send it in a like direct message to my staff because we're all Instagram friends, right? But then how does that translate? I haven't yet. It's in a message on Instagram. I know that, right? So I know where to go find it, but I need to go grab that, copy and paste the website into here, and then actually do the research to find out how much the grant is for, when is it due, what's gonna be required of it, okay? So I have one place, it's one bulletin board where and it keeps changing. Every time you find a grant, every time Andy sends us an email, it's like, hey, would this work for you? Stick it in here, do some research, plan to spend a few, hours a week or an hour a week, just opening this up and refreshing it and saying, hey, what do I need to work on this week? And it's all here in one place, all your logins.
So these are grants that are available, not grants that you have applied for, correct?
It's actually gonna be everything, right? So it's gonna be available, and then once you apply for them, you're gonna continue to fill out the information. Yeah. Okay, so let's move into like actually getting to a grant that you're gonna apply for, okay? So on the bottom of this spreadsheet, you're gonna see 4 different tabs, okay? There's the master grant tracking. Then we have application tracking template, we have timeline template, and we have program tracking template, okay? So these are all templates. Some things can be super simple, like you write a grant, you submit it, you get an award letter back, they send you the money, and you never hear from them again, okay? I've gotten that grant before, it's great, it's awesome, okay? Up to the difficulty level can like hit the sky, right? Like you write a grant, they come back at you and say, this doesn't work, can you change this? You resubmit all this stuff, you rework your budget, you resubmit it. They come back to you and say, well, we can't fund you at this, but we can fund you at this. Great, then you come up with a new grant agreement, you all sign that, and then you have like all these benchmarks and you have reports due to them. Like it can get really onerous, I think is the right word. And then you have reports due, and then you have to like save insurance documents for 7 years after the grant, right? Like so many things, right? So we tried to put together some templates that are going to be fairly simple. You're not going to need to use them for every grant, but hopefully they're useful for the majority of grants that we're looking at, okay? All that to say, there's tons of stuff out there. We tried to simplify things for where probably most of us are at, okay? Okay, so now move over to the application tracking template. If you can, are you there, Andy? Yes. Okay, cool. Okay, so this is once you find a grant that you're actually gonna apply for, okay? And we'll walk through this a little bit more. You'll walk through this, right? Okay, we're gonna look more in depth at this in a little bit with an actual grant, okay? And show you like how to actually fill this out with a grant application right next to it, okay? But this is for individual grants. So you're not gonna list a bunch of different grants on here. This is gonna be an individual grant. So you're gonna make copies of this template page for each application that you're applying for, okay? So that's how you're gonna use this page. And then the timeline template, again, this is something that you can use later on, and Kelsey's gonna go over it. I just want you to know where it's at right now, okay? And then the program tracking template. When I say program, that's gonna talk about like one thing that we do, okay? So Lowell CDC, we're doing wilderness program, okay? That's a program of ours. That's not our entire organization, right? That is one sliver of work that we do that can get funded, right? People want to fund outdoor ed. People want to fund, right? So we've gotten grants for just that. So our wilderness program actually can be funded by 2 or 3 grants at a time, okay? And so this program tracking template is going to track a program that may have multiple funding sources, okay? So you have a grant, that's one funding source for one program, but you also can have one program that has multiple funding sources. So that's where this is gonna come in. Good morning. Somebody else come in. I just wanna make sure they belong here. Hi and welcome. Hi, Angie. Oh yeah, she belongs here. She works here. Okay, so we'll get more into how to use all these later on. You guys can play with them. They're for you guys to play with and work on, okay? Okay, so I'm also gonna go into, so go back to our agenda. And then, okay, so a few things I'm gonna go over is in our templates folder, we have a grant opportunity summary sheet. We have a project tracking template, which we just looked at. And then there's other things too. So this is when we're getting into organizing our individual grant folders. You're gonna want these things in that folder. So hopefully this makes sense to you. You can look through the agenda and see, we've kind of tried to lay things out, okay? And then I just went through like all the sheets. So let's see, where do I want to go from here? Oh, I'm gonna go through general information. Okay, so go to one of the things that you have to have for any grant that you're gonna apply for is your general information about your organization. And most grants are gonna ask for all of this information. Some are gonna ask for some of the information, and some are gonna ask for all this information plus more information, okay? So we wanted to put in one place an easy way for you guys to just start gathering information about your organization that's gonna be helpful and speed up the process when you're applying for multiple grants in a year. And it has extremely helped me in applying for grants year after year, because this information changes a little bit, but not drastically year after year. So once you gather all this information in one place, it makes your process way easier, okay? So go to your, I think it's in templates, the grant, it's in the grant workshop folder. And then in the templates folder, there's a document that's called General Information Profile, okay? This is a fill in the blanks plus checklist, okay, of general information that almost every single grant is gonna need. Like I said, some grants are gonna need more information than this, some grants are gonna need less information than this. But this is a great place to start with your team to get this filled out. That way, if you're writing grants for your organization, or if you're writing grants as an intern for your organization, right? And you're leaving next year, or you're leaving in 6 months, this stays with the organization and the next person coming in has access to all this information. If you decide to work with a grant writer, hire somebody like Jason, who we talked to a few months ago, right? If you decided to hire Jason to grant write for you, he's gonna need access to all this information. And so it will drastically save your time and value his time if it's all in one place, already ready to go, okay? So Hector just highlighted it all.
Oh,
Good for you, Tyler, Hector. Again, that's okay. That's okay. It's tracking changes. I don't know why I had that on. So basically you can write, or you can create a copy of this and add it to your 2021 grants folder, okay? That's my goal, is for you to use this. You can fill out this information here. And you know, we don't all have a mission, a vision, and values written out, okay? But write out what you do have. All of our organizations should have a mission by this point. So maybe. Yeah, okay. So we all should have a mission. Some of us have a vision statement. Some of us don't. Some of us have value statements. Some of us don't. So fill out whatever you can for your organization, okay? Your organization summary. Who are you and what do you do? Remember your audience too, okay? When we're grant writing, and Kelsey's gonna talk more to this in a little bit, but when we're grant writing, we have varied audiences. People who are very familiar with our organization sometimes, and then other people who've never heard of us before, okay? So how do you explain who we are and what we do to folks who have no clue, right? So think about that. What does your organization do? Some of your accomplishments, if there's an award or you've been recognized for something, like the Lowell CDC built a house before I was the executive director, so I can't take credit for this. We built a house and there's some historic preservation awards that were given to that house by the mayor, okay? So I never can remember what the name of those historic preservation awards are. So I have those like copied and pasted from old board members who actually received those awards, so that when I'm talking about development and our organizational capacity to do development, I can write that we have these accomplishments, we have these awards when it comes to historic preservation in our neighborhood, okay? Our demographics, who are we serving? And then most of us are CDCs, we have boundaries, we have an area. So I put a map in here, write down specific, I've had some grants ask for a map of where our area is. I've had some grants ask for a description of the area, right? So just write that all down, put it into a place where it's there. That way, I know every time I hire a new staff person or have an intern comes in, this is really good information for them too, because then I'm not spending all my time explaining the same things over and over, okay, of who we are and what we do. And then in this folder, you're also gonna need, so I put in here, org credibility file. So create another file in your general information for each year. And all of these attachments, well, again, a lot of these attachments are going to be required on most of the grants that you apply for. Some grants require 3 attachments, some grants require 18 attachments, okay? So, this laundry list here of things that you need to have ready and available. Some of these things change every year, so they need to be updated every year. I make a point in January of every year to create a new folder and copy in my board of directors roster, staff roster, so that's list of board of directors, titles, and affiliations. That's the first thing on this list, okay? So I copy it from my last year folder into my new folder for the year, and I update my board membership on there. We have board members change every 6 months or a year, so that needs to be updated. Their affiliations, their titles, don't put their addresses or their phone numbers on there. This is for grants. Nobody needs that information, okay? Have that somewhere else, okay. Current and previous year's operating budget amounts. When our board approves an operating budget for the year, I create a copy of that and I stick it in here as a PDF. So it's not changing. If our board updates a budget for the year, then I try and stick it in there. Okay. So it's our current operating budget. Most recent financial statements audited if possible. We're not big enough to be audited, so we don't get audited. I know some of you all organizations do. So that's great. If you have them, put them there. If you don't have them, like a balance sheet and like a profit and loss sheet is what I've experienced being the most important things. But those things, most grants want like the most recent. So you can put it in for the last current year, especially, so here's the thing, when we were a smaller organization a few years ago and we filed a 990N, which is the postcard, okay? It's not the full form, tax form, okay? Most grants require your 990s. Well, when you file a 990N, the postcard, as a smaller organization, there is no paperwork with that. You file a postcard. So when a grant asks for your 990, you're kind of like, I didn't fill it out, but I don't have to fill it out, right? So it kind of puts you in like a, oops. So number one, if you don't fill out a 990, when you're a small enough organization to just do the postcard, that's fine. Consider maybe filing one anyway. It will help with taxes. Or this is a good thing, Kelsey's gonna talk about later, building that relationship with the funder, figure out what they're looking for. Because sometimes that can be accomplished with submitting your operating budget, submitting your profit and loss, submitting your most current, cash flow budget, that sort of thing, okay? Or statements. So sometimes you can alternate reports that are required, but you have to ask about that. Okay. We all have, or we should all be working on getting our determination letter. Your determination letter is the original letter from the IRS stating that you are a 501c3 and it has your EIN number on it, okay? That is gonna be required for almost every single grant because grants go to 501c3s. And so that's gonna be that proof, okay? Your bylaws, your articles of incorporation, most times you're not being asked for these, but sometimes you are. So it's good to just have them in a place. Make sure they're the signed copies. For the longest time, I didn't have signed copies of ours. I had them as a Google Doc and they weren't like the official signed copies. I remember submitting a grant one time and somebody came back to me and they're like, do you have a signed version of your bylaws? And I was like, oh, I don't know. So I had to go find it. We did actually. So that was good. The org chart, if you have staff, sometimes I had to submit an org chart one time for a grant and it was like literally me part-time. I was the only employee, but they needed an org chart. So like literally put together an org chart with the board of directors at the top and the executive director right underneath of them. Like that was our org chart. It had 2 boxes on it, right? So put that together, whether you're small or big, it's good to have. The resume of your key staff members, not all grants are gonna need this, but some will. Proof of insurance. When I say insurance, most of the time that's your directors and officers insurance or general liability insurance. There are some grants, if you're getting like CDBG funding from the city or something like that, good luck. Fight them is all I can say, fight them. They're gonna ask for lots of insurance, fight them. Okay, and then your W-9. This is how most foundations And people who are writing you a check, they require a W-9. I usually sign one every year, upload it to my Google Drive as a PDF. And that way, anybody asks for my W-9, it's there. I know where it's at. Okay. All right, that's the checklist. So once you get this folder put together for your organization, you're ready to go. You write all the grants. Andy, does anybody have any questions at this point in the chat?
Not yet. You can invite me to
Okay.
chat.
Yeah, if you guys, I mean, I don't care if you unmute yourself or if you want to jump in the chat. If you have any questions about this general information that you're needing to gather for your organization. Or if you had any comments or concerns.
This is great. So thorough.
Good,
Really excited.
good. Okay, so we've gone through some Google Sheets. We've gone through general grant info. I think those are my two main parts. I'm making sure that I've covered everything here real quick for you guys.
Separate structure, Esther, thanks for sharing this. Awesome.
Okay, so also when you're doing individual grant folders, I'm wondering if, would it be helpful if I shared my drive so people can see my system? Would that be helpful for you all?
Real world example.
Real world example of my Google Drive? Okay.
Yes, please.
Let me see if I can join our meeting real quick and then I can share.
Well, you can send me the link if you want to. and I can
Oh.
share from here.
Perfect. Yes. That would be way easier. You're gonna have access to all of my grant applications. Oh.
Careful, I like to highlight this.
Okay, Andy. Share anyway. You're shared with my grants. Okay.
Is it via email?
Oh, I don't know how it came. I just, okay. Okay, so let me flip over so I can see Andy's screen at the same time I'm talking. I can get-
I have a question real quick. Yeah, so like on all like the grant tracking list and the grant summary and the general info, do you keep like a general info, like your basic, your blank ones, and then just copy a new one into your year folder, or do you keep them in the year folder?
I just keep them in the year folder and then, because a lot of the grants that you're gonna apply for this year, you're actually gonna wanna probably apply for again next year. Your login information on a grant portal website is gonna stay the same year after year. So like that grant tracking, you know, you could even just like create a new sheet and move the entire sheet to your new folder. Did she share anything yet? Okay. So, yeah, it just kind of depends on what works for you.
Okay.
Yeah, creating your system that works for you. Sure. Okay, so, yeah, in my grants folder, so here's the other thing. Again, you have to figure out what works for you. I have a grants folder. I also have a tax documents folder, okay? So it's easier for me to keep everything tax related with my EIN on it and my W-9, like anything that's like IRS formish stays in my tax folder. I know that, I know where it's at. So when I need to pull a grant together, it's there. Also, I will just add, and not to make things more difficult, but you have to have all this place on the drive or somewhere where, you know, multiple people can access it. But when you actually go to applying for a grant, you cannot attach something from a Google Drive folder into a website, okay? You have to upload from your computer. So you're gonna end up downloading all of these documents onto your computer as well when you go to actually apply for a grant. So, but again, the beauty of the drive is most people have access to them. It's not gonna delete if something happens to your computer, that sort of thing. So you're gonna have to probably have like 2 folders. Okay, yay, you're in my drive. Okay, so here's my grants folder. It's, like I said, simple. It has years on it, okay? So let's go to 2018 was a, no, 17 was a really busy year for grants. So you're gonna go to 2017 there. Great. Okay, so you can see I have 4 different grants there, but then I also have all this other information there too. 2017, we were working on tenant education like no tomorrow, okay? So our Cashin Foundation grant and our CDBG grant were both for tenant education. We were also working with Fresno State. Ooh, okay. We were also working with Fresno State, and they did a bunch of research for us. They helped us write our tenant education workbook and all of that. So there's like work that Fresno State was doing. Also, you can see there's a letter of support from ENP there. So kind of like general stuff, I kind of kept in this folder here because I was trying to apply for more than one grant about tenant education. I put helpful information in here about tenant education that I could pull for any grant. Okay, they weren't like grant specific. Okay, so click on CDBG because that one's going to be like way more intense. Okay, so CDBG. In this one, I have another folder called reports at the top. So I actually got the CDBG grant, okay? And so CDBG money is Community Development Block Grant money. That's federal money. It gets given to the city of Fresno, and then the city of Fresno gives that out for different purposes, okay? All like housing, community development, that sort of thing, okay? This money is available to all of us organizations because we're community development corporations, okay? We can apply for this money for programs. We can apply for this money for some like infrastructure stuff, community buildings, that sort of thing, parks, streets, all that kind of stuff gets funded by this. This money is very hard to use. I will say that, okay? The requirements that the city of Fresno and HUD have placed on this money are super onerous. So one of the grants, just for example, one of my grants I wrote was for $17,000, okay? Not a ton of money, but it was enough. I think it was enough to fund tenant education for a year. So they sent me the award letter, I received it, and with the award letter came all the requirements that we had to abide by in order to get the money. Part of those requirements were insurance. Okay, I'm gonna go down this rabbit hole for a second. Were insurance, okay? I didn't recognize some of the kinds of insurance they were asking me to have. Never heard of it before. I didn't know you could get insurance for all these things, okay? So I started calling and getting quotes on what would it cost. Also, with that money, you have to keep records of everything you did for that year for 7 years. And some of the insurances you had to keep for 7 years after the grant period, okay? That's part of the agreement. So I got quotes for the insurance, added it all up for 7 years. The amount of insurance I was gonna pay was almost $20,000. So for me getting $17,000 for 1 year, I was gonna be out $20,000 just in insurance. That wasn't a part of that grant. It wasn't being paid for by that grant. So I was gonna have to find $20,000 in order to receive my $17,000. And that money has to be spent first, and then you get a reimbursement check, okay? So they're not giving you money to spend. You have to have the money to spend the money, okay? Again, very difficult to use CDBG money, but that is the one thing that everybody tells you when you get into CDC work. Oh, there's CDBG money that you can use. Yeah, it's so fun. Don't do it. So, and actually, if any of you guys want to talk more about this later, I am open for the conversation. This year, 2017, that we're looking at right now, or no, this is program year 18, never mind. All of my money for program year 17 funding that I got, I ended up having to pay back to the city of Fresno. Because they weren't clear with me on what requirements on my intake form. When we had people take tenant education, we had to certify that everybody was low income taking tenant education, okay? We did tenant education all over this city at many of our highest impacted schools, okay? Most of those classes were in Spanish because most of people that we taught did not speak English, okay? It was their second language. And we had little boxes like income, 0 to, 5,000, 5,000 to 10,000, like little boxes to check for people. HUD's requirement was that people actually write in the amount. So all of those surveys that we collected, HUD said all those people are over income because we can't certify that they're low income. So because we educated all of those people who were low income, but we couldn't HUD couldn't certify that they were low income, we got docked, and our report says that we didn't do what we agreed to do and educate low income people in the city of Fresno. Okay, so if you go back in reports, you go to city council meetings. I got a text the other day from a community member, and they were like, "Hey, I see here on the city budget they're reallocating like $17,000 that the Lowell CDC didn't use properly. They're reallocating it for other funding. What happened? Like, are they taking money away from you?" And I'm like, well, yeah, but no. Like, I mean, there's nothing I could do. It's HUD requirements. So just know, like, if you are going to apply for that money, it's hard. Total side note. Okay. So in this folder here, we've got our reports, and then we've got the actual draft for the application draft. We have our final sub-recipient agreement. Then we have a Lowell CDC extension agreement. So everything that was happening during this grant gets put in this. You can see there's applications, there's current proposed neighborhoods, there's HUD requirements in here, there's applications, there's like everything is in here. So I just wanted you guys to see that. Okay, go back, Andy, to, let's see a simpler one. Let's go to, I think, Cashin Foundation. That one's super simple. There you go. Okay, so there's 3 things there in the Cashin Foundation one, okay? There's the application, then it's a PDF, so that's my final version, okay? There's my Word document application, so that's the one that I was opening up and working in, okay? Then my final is the one with my wet signature on it, scanned it, it's there as a PDF. And then my budget. They wanted a project budget, okay? I don't think they asked for much else. It was super simple. There was a report that I did for this one, but it literally was an email that I sent to, they emailed me at the end of the cycle and they said, how are things going? Please give us a summary. And it was literally a paragraph summary. So that's probably why it's not in here. But normally there would be like a report in there as well. So that's like super simple. So there you go. Super simple to very difficult. And that's how I keep them all organized, is by year that I applied for them. I don't have very many grants that are multi-year, but I have started. And so I try and just keep them in the year that I applied for them. But then sometimes I'm like, well, now there's reporting in the next year. So sometimes I'll just put a new folder in the new year and it will just have reporting for that grant that I applied for the last year. So whatever works for you. Again, you're gonna have to figure out what works for you. Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Kelsey. She's gonna walk through some more logistics on actually writing a grant. If there was no questions in the chat, was there any? Okay, cool. Cool, thank you all.
Alrighty, so the first thing that I have here on, talking about grant development process is actually something that I know you all are very well aware of, is the relationship building. Relationship building, I just want to reiterate that is really paramount to anything else that we can really teach you. Relationships, like, far and away will take you longer in your grant writing journey, and open up more doors than anything else that we really can teach you. I'm not going to say that it can save you from missing a deadline from submitting a grant, but I just want to emphasize that relationship building, cultivating connections with funders, with your, continuing to cultivate your existing relationships with your current funders, and also exploring new ones is incredibly important. Reaching out to them, even when they don't ask to hear from you, is really important. Keeping them up to date on your progress, also keeping them up to date on any struggles that you're having, questions, other support and help that you need, is always really, really important. One good tool to use that, not as a substitute for staying in contact with them, but it is good to connect with them on things like LinkedIn. If you have social media pages for your organizations, tagging your funders in your posts and your updates about what you're doing, that's always a good thing to do. So the first thing that you want to do when you come across a grant is, obviously, you do your research, you read the, there's a lot of acronyms for these things, but sometimes it's called most commonly an RFP, which is a request for proposals. There's several different names for that document. Sometimes if it's a government grant, it'll be called a NOFA, which is a notice of funding availability.
Sorry, can you just project a little bit more this way?
Oh, that's right, yeah. So sometimes it's called an RFP, sometimes it's called a NOFA if it's a federal opportunity. There's several different acronyms. So you want to find that document. You really want to read that thoroughly and early. And one thing that I really like to do is I actually go through that with a highlighter and I highlight any keywords, especially in the sections where funders are talking about their priorities and what their intent of that specific grant opportunity is. Going through and highlighting their keywords and phrases, that makes it really easy later on when you're going back and you're writing your actual grant to have that right next to you and just take those words and kind of strategically drop them in. Almost like, I mean, you're not plagiarizing, but you're just kind of feeding that language back to the funder so that it connects with the way that they talk about the issue that they're, focused on. So if they're talking about social determinants of health, you want to weave that in, talk about which social determinants of health you're addressing. If they're talking about, resident empowerment, like really use that word throughout. You want to just really have it resonate with the way that they talk about the work and the way that they want to see work done in the community. Well, the first thing I should say though, when you are looking through a grant opportunity is really determining your the eligibility. That's pretty paramount, because if you're not eligible, there's only one other thing you can really do. Look at your partners and see if maybe you have a partner, if you have a relationship with another organization who would be eligible, who would be willing to partner with you on that application. But that's the first thing you want to do so you don't waste your time. If it's, you have to be a school district to apply, then maybe move on and use your time looking at other opportunities. The next thing is there's a template in the folder called the Grant Opportunity Summary template that I really like to use. It's just a one-pager. It's a table with all the very high-level details of what the grant is. That's a good exercise to go through just to get the overview of what the grant is about. It's the Grant Opportunity Summary template. It's also a good tool if you're looking at a grant and you want to send it to another partner to talk about maybe doing a collaborative application with them. You can send that to them. I am a little bit old school and that I still like to print some stuff out. I like to have those hard copies, like I mentioned, to highlight. So I actually print that grant summary template out and I staple it to the front of every RFP that we're looking at, just so, because it's a really good quick glance of what the grant is, the deadline, how much we can ask for, all those high level details. So if that is useful for you, please feel free to use it or to adjust it to your needs.
Is that template in the Google?
Yeah, it's called, one more time, it's called the Grant Opportunity Summary template.
And it's on that first screen.
And let me just say, just for future you guys leave today and you're like, oh my gosh, there was so much stuff. Our agenda that we're talking through today is also in the folder. And on the agenda, we have underlined or the name or in parentheses template next to what we're talking about. Okay, so you have access to the agenda, and also in the agenda, we've tried to make sure that the names match so that when you see on the agenda that we're talking about something, it matches what the name of it is in the Google Docs. Okay.
Great.
We tried.
Great. So the next thing is, if the grant is a online submission, which the majority of them are nowadays, you'll want to go ahead and create your account if you don't have one already. If you do have one, be sure to go in and make sure that it's still active, that you still have the correct password. Do that as early as possible. A lot of times portals will have a time limit where you have to submit a request, and then the funder has to go in and approve you, and it'll take X number of business days for them to authorize you to access their system. So go ahead and do that right away. Even if you're not completely sure you're going to apply for a grant, sometimes it's a good idea to create one that will allow you to get in, see the application, look at what kinds of questions they're asking, what sorts of attachments they're going to be requiring of you, because they don't always make that available without being able to access their portal. So it's a good idea to get access to the portal. Read through all the questions, make sure you don't see any red flags of stuff that you're not going to be able to gather before the deadline. Then what I like to do is, once you're actually looking at the grant portal, is go back to the application tracking template that Esther mentioned, and you're going to walk through the portal, and every attachment that they require, you're going to add to the application tracking template as one item on your checklist of things to do while going through that application. You also want to take any narrative questions that they are going to ask of you and put those in a shared doc, the Google Docs, like basically the Microsoft Word version on Google Docs. That's a great tool to use rather than just using Microsoft on your own computer, to use it on a shared doc, because then you can have your staff help you with that. It can be the most current live version rather than floating around different versions through email and losing, corrections. If you have the live version on Google Docs of your narrative questions, I've found the best way to do it. Let's see. If there's any sort of webinar info session, if you're looking at a county grant opportunity, sometimes they're called a bidders conference. Be sure to attend those. Even if you don't have questions about the grant, it's a really good idea to have you or somebody from your organization attend one of those. Sometimes you'll get a little bit more insight on what the funder really is looking to fund. If you do have questions about the opportunity, a lot of times they'll have a deadline to submit questions by. That's really more for government grants, though. On the foundation side, they're a little bit more lenient. So don't hesitate to reach out to them if you have questions about the application, you can try even asking them what the meaning of a certain question is. You won't always maybe get the exact clarification, but it never hurts to try to reach out to them. So do register for the webinar. A lot of times they'll require you to attend in advance. If you happen to miss it, a lot of times they'll record it and post it online. So it's a good use of your time to watch those. And like I said, contacting the funder with questions. Sometimes that can be a little tricky, finding out who is the right person to contact. In the RFP, oftentimes they will have a contact listed there, a name of a staff person with either an email or a phone number. Don't be afraid to be persistent in trying to reach out to them, because a lot of times they're juggling a lot on their plate. So like we all are here. So just don't be afraid to contact them with questions that you have. Oh, and then as I mentioned, creating the Google Doc for narrative questions. One thing I want to mention too is being mindful of your character counts or word counts. When you're looking in the grant portal, a lot of times, pretty much always, they'll have some sort of a maximum length to your answers. Sometimes it's in a word count, sometimes it's a character count. Go ahead and put that in your working document of your narrative questions, what the maximum is. So it's right there in front of you. And I also want to encourage you to, even if you're not completely finished with your response, maybe take the time to go back into the grant portal and paste it in there. The reason I say that is because sometimes things like symbols like the ampersand or hyphens or percentage signs will, once you paste them into the grant portal system, for whatever reason, it counts as like 3 or 4 characters. So I just want to save you from the stress that we've been through before of on the very last day, in the last 15 minutes, you're pasting in answers in the grant portal and you're down to the minute. And then you realize, oh my gosh, I have to cut down on this answer. It's over the limit and it won't let me upload it. So don't hesitate to go in advance and just be pasting your answers in there just to make sure that you're within the limit, because that's incredibly unpleasant, I'll say. Let's see. Oh, and as I mentioned too, incorporating, be sure to incorporate those keywords or phrases from the RFP. You can also look through, you should be looking through the funder's website too, at when they're talking about that grant program, when they're, you know, read their mission statement, read their, if they have visions and values, read those, read about what other organizations they've funded, look on their social media pages, see what other types of grantees they've highlighted, and just pull any keywords that you can from there, as long as they're relevant to the work that you're committing to doing in your proposal. The next thing I want to just touch on briefly is SMART objectives. A lot of funders will require you to come up with SMART objectives. And if you haven't heard of that acronym before, SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. They're looking for a statement that will include all of those components. So sometimes you'll really need to work on those and tweak them a little bit more. But specific meaning you want to commit to doing something very specific, not just say we're gonna, you know, improve health in the you know, Smith neighborhood. It's got to be a little bit more specific, a little bit more tailored to the intent of whatever that grant opportunity is and whatever work you're going to be doing. It needs to be measurable. You need to be able to track it, and you need to report on it in some sort of a quantifiable way by the end of the grant period. It's got to be achievable for your organization. You don't want to be committing, obviously, to anything you won't be able to achieve. It's got to be relevant, again, to what the funder is looking to do and what their priorities are. And lastly, time bound. A lot of times the time is just within the 12-month grant period or within the 24-month grant period, we will XYZ. The next thing is talking about outputs versus outcomes. There's a sheet in the shared folder there that goes into much more detail on the difference between those, but I'll just kind of touch on those briefly. Outputs are basically kind of equivalent to activities. So for example, I'll go back to Esther's example of the tenant education. So an output would be the Lowell CDC will conduct 20 tenant education workshops over the 12-month grant period. That would be an output. You're going to do these activities. You're going to host these meetings. You're going to attend these sessions. You're going to contact these residents. An outcome is basically the secondary result because of those activities. A lot of times that results to like a change in behavior or a change in knowledge level or an awareness, a change in awareness. So for example, you know, 70% of tenant workshop attendees will demonstrate an increased knowledge of their rights as tenants or what have you. So those are that's the paramount difference, but you can feel free to go through that attachment. It'll go into a lot more detail on the differences between outputs and outcomes. There's a lot more resources out there too on what the differences are between those. A lot of times the funders themselves, when they're asking for those, they'll give examples. So pay attention to those as well and make sure yours reflect the funders' examples of how they differentiate between an output and an outcome. Okay, then next moving on to thinking through and developing a project budget and a project budget narrative. I think we have, yeah, we've got an example of a project budget. A lot of funders will include their own budget templates. So definitely use those. If they don't provide one, then start to develop one that you use for your organization if you don't have one already. And what I like to do is really include the maximum possibility of different line items and categories on there. So that way you start from all the possibilities of things that you can charge to a grant, and then you narrow it down rather than sending something in and realizing, oh my gosh, I forgot to include rent, or, you know, you don't want to miss something that's really important if you were able to include it in that budget. Be sure to read through when you are going through the RFP about allowable costs. A lot of funders will allow you to charge certain things, some won't. Like, for example, food is always kind of a contentious thing. If you're wanting to provide refreshments or incentives for people to attend meetings and workshops, food can be a thing that a lot of funders, well, that's really more on the government side, I should say. But if you can just be mindful of those so you don't include things that are clearly laid out as not allowable costs, that'll save you some headache or even save you from your application getting thrown out in the process. The budget narrative, there's lots of examples out there online. If you just look for budget narrative or a budget justification, that just provides a little bit more detail on what your budget is and how it relates to the activities that you're promising to do in your application. So a lot of times it'll say, you know, your executive director and it'll include in your budget 0.2 FTE, which stands for full-time equivalent. So it's 20% of your executive director's salary is to be included in this project budget. And then a 1 or 2 sentence description of what their responsibility is related to this project. So executive director will oversee the, you know, accomplishment of XYZ activities. So it's, again, relating that cost back to what this grant is actually promising to do. So meetings, if you've got meetings in your budget, you're going to say Lowell CDC will host X number of meetings with X number of participants to accomplish XYZ. So again, relating it back so that when the reviewers are looking at your budget, they understand, oh, I remember reading about that activity in the project description. Now I'm seeing the budget, I see this cost, and I understand how that ties back to their project, rather than it just being a random list of costs and then activities, and there's no bridge between the two. You want to make it easier for the reviewers to look at that and see a seamless connection between the two. Okay, the next. I just added in there, if the grant asks for an executive summary, one good thing to do is just to wait and do that very last. Once you've written out your project, decided what you're going to accomplish, all the activities you're going to do, come back and do that very last, because that's your kind of high level overall summary of your project. One thing that I'll mention too is that the grant writing process is not linear. When we look into the portal in a little bit, we're going to look at an example. You're not going to start writing it at the beginning and go all the way to the end. It's really going to kind of hop around. And one thing I like to encourage people to do is to really get started on their budget early, because that a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times will really drive the development of your project. It'll determine how many workshops you can host. It'll determine how many staff you can hire. It'll determine how much of that staff person's salary you can cover with that project. So really try to nail down your budget as early as possible. If you need to go back and tweak it a little bit, that's okay, but it doesn't make sense to go through and write a lot of answers to your grant and then come and do your budget and realize, oh shoot, that doesn't match, or I don't have enough money to do this. Now I have to go back and rewrite all this stuff. So it just saves you a little bit more time and a little bit of a headache to nail down your budget, especially if you're working with partners too. That makes it even a little bit more complicated. So try to nail down your budget as early as possible, and then afterwards, then start on your narrative answers. And the next thing is just considering your audience, like Esther mentioned. Consider who is going to be the reviewers of your grant. Who's the funder? Do you know them already? If you need to ask your contact there, don't be afraid to ask them too. Hey, who's going to be reviewing this grant? Is it a local committee here in the Valley? Is it somebody for like the Western region? If it's a national bank, don't be afraid to ask them who's reviewing this. How specific do I need to be? Are they aware of Fresno? Do they know my community? Do they know me? Do they know the work we've done in the past? Also think about them in terms of what their priorities are. And I don't know of any other way to say this other than like, think about them in terms of like what their worldviews are, and even like politics sometimes, because you want to really appeal to that. Do it obviously with integrity. You don't want to like make up a bunch of stuff that's not true, but maybe leave out, some of the certain focuses that you have if you understand that those aren't really going to resonate with them. It's particularly like local funders. If you have relationships with certain organizations that a potential funder is not necessarily that big of a fan of, maybe just leave them out. You don't need to really emphasize that. You don't need to name that unless they're really. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So Esther was talking. Esther, was this a couple years ago?
This was the Cashin Foundation.
She was talking with the Cashin Foundation, who is the developers of River Park and a bunch of other stuff around town. She had been in conversations with them. And she was mentioning that we partner a lot with the Housing Authority. We're great, strong partners with them. We've got a long-term relationship with them. And they said, well, you might want to leave that out because the Cashins aren't necessarily, super, that doesn't really align with the way that they see, things, or if they want to see development happen. So, just things like that. Do be mindful of those things. And if you don't think they're going to resonate with the funder, go ahead and leave it out. Don't be afraid to just kind of skip over that. Obviously doing it with integrity, not being dishonest. Okay, then the next thing is proofreading for consistency. Making sure that when you go through and finish your budget and then you're writing all of your narrative questions and you're also gathering your attachments, making sure that those are all consistent across everything for the whole application. So even though you're going to have that folder of general attachments that Esther talked about, like with your resumes and your org chart and your board member list and all that, sometimes those things will change a little bit per grant, and not all of those, but I'm thinking of like your org chart. If you're promising to hire a part-time community outreach person, you need to go in and edit your org chart. You need to put that person on your org chart to show where they fit in your organization, who they're going to report to, who, if it's a new person that's supervising someone, who they're going to oversee, what level of responsibility they're going to have. So make sure you look through every attachment, every answer to the application to make sure it's consistent across, and the funder's not going to come back and say, hey, you said you were going to hire this person, but they're not here on your org chart. Or, you mentioned this person's a key staff member, but I don't see a resume for them if they ask for resumes. If your budget says that you're going to conduct X number of workshops, but then in your project description, that number doesn't match, just making sure that everything is consistent all the way across so it makes the job of the reviewers really easy. That's kind of what I like to say about grant writing is your paramount job for being a grant writer is making the job of the grant reviewers easy, making it easy for them to come back and say, yes, we want to give you an award. Yes, we completely understand your organization. Yes, we understand what you want to do. And yes, we understand how your work is going to align what we as a funder want to accomplish. So try to make everything when you're thinking about developing your grant, put yourself in the shoes of that reviewer and make it their job easy to come back and say, yes, we want to give you this grant. The last thing that I'll mention is allowing time for technical issues. As I mentioned too, with the grant portal, try to upload if you can at all possible, at least a couple days in advance. It's just really not fun. I know a lot of people here have been in that seat before of uploading grants literally down to the last minute. So just try to allow time for technical issues. A lot of times it maybe not even your fault. It's the funders, portal or whatever. Just the more time you can give yourself, the better the process will be in the long run. And it'll give you time to come back to the funder if you have questions or need help or don't understand a certain part of the application. Just give yourself as much time as possible. Let's see. One thing I was just going to kind of mention as an overall thing with a lot of these templates and tools that we're sharing with you, it might seem a little overkill, especially if you only have like a couple grants for your organization. But developing the habits of using these tools early on is really the best thing that you can do for your organization. Tweak them as needed, but it's really difficult to wait to try to implement these systems later on once your organization grows in the future and you're starting to take on more grants and submit more applications. If you already have these systems in place, it makes it so much less stressful later, so much easier, so much, as Esther mentioned, so much cheaper too. If and when you get to the point where you're going to hire an external grant writer, it'll save you time, especially for those grant writers that have to charge you per hour. It just makes it way easier down the road. Oh, one other thing I forgot to mention earlier, I should have mentioned this earlier, talking about the process, is letters of support. a lot of not a lot, but some grants will ask for letters of support. That's another thing you want to do pretty early in the process is draft those up. And reach out to your partners and other organizations you have relationships with to and ask them to sign one of those. You want to give them a decent amount of time to read over the template that you provide to them and get a signature back from them. It's just courteous to give them like at least, I would say at least a week, if possible, a couple weeks to get that letter back to you. A lot of times you'll have to follow up because as we all know, we're all really busy. So be sure to get that on your plate as early as possible rather than waiting till the last minute. So I think that was everything from my list.
Then are you gonna walk through the Wells Fargo?
Yeah. Are there any questions on what we've talked about so far before we move on to talking about the example grant? Okay. Good. Okay. How do I access the?
It's in the folder. Do you want me to do it on my computer?
Yeah, can you?
Yeah.
Or
So you can see what Andy's sharing. Oh, Wells Fargo.
Are we going to do Wells
Yeah.
Fargo?
Okay. Yeah. Wells Fargo. So just tell Andy what you want her to pull up on the screen.
Okay.
We don't have anything in the attachments, so it's just the application. So I will say okay, so we're gonna walk through an actual grant application, okay? I have applied for a Wells Fargo grant in the past, and so I have an online portal, so I was able to log in and pull their entire application. It is not, I think you have to have an invitation to apply for it now, correct? Yeah. And so I did not have an invitation to apply for it. It is not open for applications. Okay, so I will just say that we're going to use it as a mock because it was my first grant application that I ever submitted, and I felt like it's a pretty standard on the simple side of a grant application. Okay, so it is again, it's only available on their online portal, which is very, very difficult to work on a grant application on an online portal because you can't have multiple people log in, but you're just like, you can't co-work on it very well, okay? So I literally copied and pasted everything into a Google Doc, and it was like 50 some pages long, it's, right? Like, because it had like, what state are you from? And then it listed every single 52 states right down. And so it was just like super long in a Google Doc, and it didn't look very good. So Andy spent how long did you spend on this, Andy?
Oh, half day.
Half a day, a few hours?
Like, yeah, 3 hours.
Okay, so these things take time, okay? So she spent time in the Google Doc, reformatting the Google Doc so it looks decent, and it's a place where we can all work on it together. Okay, so if we were gonna write the Wells Fargo grant today, we can all log into the Google Doc and have everything that's gonna be required in their online portal in our Google Doc, okay? So just that process alone, it's gonna take you a few hours, okay? But it's so valuable. You're not gonna be able to just log into the portal and start writing your narrative. Sometimes the portals don't have spell check. Sometimes, you know what I mean? Like word counts, right? Like all those things that you need access to Google Docs for, okay? So spend the time to make sure you get it all there. And then as we went through the Google Doc, I tried to highlight everything that was an attachment because like Kelsey said, these things aren't linear, okay? Drives me nuts. And if you could see our table, Kelsey was here earlier, Andy was here earlier this week. This table in the middle of our room has been covered with one grant that we're working on, okay? Kelly's been here too. One grant that we're working on. We have this entire table covered with stuff that we're working on for this one grant that's due at the end of this month, okay? Or for us, it's due the end of this month. It has another week, but our deadline is the end of this month, okay? And so it's not a linear process. It's messy. Sometimes it takes like, put some things up on the wall, put ideas on them, make big checklists, whatever, right? Like Google Sheets is great, but sometimes that doesn't work for everybody. So budget and time. So Kelsey's gonna go through the application with us today and our project, I want to say the right name, our project application or application tracking list, okay? Those two things. So we're gonna use the spreadsheet and our application. So we make sure we have it all kind of together and create a checklist for this one application that works. So you can see how to use our spreadsheet together with the application that we've copied and pasted off of the website, okay? And we've gone through there, and yeah, I've tried to highlight things in the application that like attachments that I've highlighted, right? So Kelsey, take it away. I'm sorry, I keep inserting.
And it was not you guys as long as it took me, because I made it look like that.
Yeah, Annie made it look, Annie makes
You guys don't have to
everything
do
look
that.
better.
So it'll take me 5 hours.
Yeah.
Annie makes everything look better.
Okay, so I'm not gonna read through every single question on here because a lot of this stuff is self-explanatory. But again, going through this might seem like a monumental task the first time, but then you'll have a lot of these questions answered for next future rounds of funding. So one example I'm thinking of is a lot of times they'll ask about, you know, your top 5 funding sources, which for a lot of newer organizations, that's really easy because there might only be 1 or 2. But if you already have established funding sources, then that's easier for the following rounds. You just kind of use that same information or update it as needed. One thing I'll mention too is when you're in the grant portal and you're looking at some of these questions, for example, percentage of low to moderate income population served by organization, sometimes there will be a little, I know specifically in some of these bank grant portals, they'll have a little asterisk or like a little star. And if you happen to hover your cursor exactly over that, there will be a box that pops up that provides more hidden information. Like, here's our definition of what LMI is, or here's an example of an objective, or here's, you know, further detail on what we're looking for. So be really thorough. It's a real pain in the butt that they do that they don't just put everything visible there. So be thorough, you know, scope out the grant portal as thoroughly as you can. Sometimes another super annoying thing about these portals is that they have multiple tabs as you progress through the application in the portal, and they won't let you advance to future tabs until you've answered the questions. So sometimes we'll just plug in placeholder information to be able to proceed to the next tab. And as long as you don't hit submit, you're fine. Your funder's not going to go in there and say, what do you mean your annual budget is, you know, $0 per year, or you have 0 board members, or your board member is John Smith or whoever. Just plug in placeholder information so you can get all the way through to the end before when you see that submit button, but obviously don't hit submit, so that you can see all the questions, see all the attachments, see all the requirements for that grant opportunity. And a lot of these questions are really easy because they may not necessarily even pertain to your project. So like percentage of small businesses served by organization. Let's see. Yeah, this has here all the documents required, your W-9, your.
Switch over to the application tracking list, so we can see how we're gonna fill the application tracking list out as we go through the application.
Oh, okay. I don't think I have that pulled up. Let's see. Checking. Where's it's under this one, right? I think.
So it's in the Wells Fargo folder,
Mhm.
and you'll see the application and then the tracking sheet right next to it.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
The planning list.
Is this what you're talking about? This right here?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So once when you're looking through this in the portal, anytime you see an attachment, go back to your tracking document and add that on here. So you don't miss it. You have kind of a master tracking sheet of all the pieces needed for your application.
So we have project tracking template set up with, make sure you're looking right now. Yeah, so there's like, we have the application narratives, right? Da, da, da. And then as you scroll down, you'll see, then there's worksheets and research data. So this application talks about a worksheet for general org demographics. Okay, so maybe it's pulling information, or they have a worksheet that you download and fill out, and then you're gonna upload again, okay? And then below that, there's attachments. So you see right here, we've filled in, like they need our IRS W-9, they need the determination letter, they need, so these are different things. They need a project budget. They might also have a template for that. So as we're looking through this is why sometimes it's just better to like print stuff. I'm a paper person too. And so I print the application, go through with a highlighter, and then I have my tracking template open, or even print that out and hand write in stuff, right? So that I make sure I get them both, like, so then I do have a linear type of document that when I'm going through to submit everything, I can make sure that I check off, I uploaded, or I have finished my project budget, it's in my drive. Now I can move on to my next thing. So I have some sort of linear list. So, yeah.
Yeah, so then this is a lot of the stuff that you'll have readily available in your sort of master organization background folder. Number of board members, breakdown of gender and ethnicity of your board members. A lot of times they'll ask for that too. It's nice, once you compile that, you have it and it's ready to go. You just enter it. You don't need to recalculate anything unless you've had board member changes. So this is when we are getting into these character counts. So make sure you're pasting that in here to be mindful of those, of what your limits are. If you're subgranting anything, how you're going to measure your progress. A lot of times grants will ask about how you're going to measure your progress. How you're going to track that. Are you going to use surveys? Are you going to document with photos? Are you going to, do pre and post surveys with people that you're educating on a certain thing? Funders will also want to know what sorts of recognition they're going to get from you for funding you. If you're going to use their logo on any promotional materials, on any flyers, if you can post about them to your social media. Don't be afraid to invite them out too. That's a really important thing too, to invite them to visit you for a tour, and invite them to any events that you're hosting. Include them. They love that more than anything, to feel included and invited. Even if they're not local here too, don't be afraid to invite them out. Sometimes you never know, they might come out and visit you. And that's really valuable for them too, to see you and to see your community. Yeah, again, a lot of this stuff is not necessarily relevant to your project, so it'll be just kind of an easy answer. If you're not serving the whole homeless population, that's just a no, and then you get to move on. Is your project related to COVID relief? And then we have more attachments here, your 990 and financial statements. This is other funding sources. So where it says worksheet, so this funder has a specific template they want you to use to list out what other funding sources you've got for your organization. Oh, I think I'm losing connection on.
Can we share on my side?
Yeah, I think it disconnected for some reason. We were on page 10. Yeah, you can keep scrolling down.
Oh.
That's okay. So this will kind of give you an idea of the types of questions they might ask. But like Esther said, every single grant is different.
We've covered this application enough, like we can just move into like some discussion and questions.
I think so, yeah. The one other thing I just realized that I wanted to mention too, when you're reading through an RFP, which again is the request for proposals, one of the best kind of gifts a funder can give you a lot of time is if they spell out the criteria in the RFP that the reviewers will be using to look over applications. It's often that they won't, but sometimes they actually will. They'll give you the worksheet that the reviewers are gonna have next to them when they're looking at your application. And that is honestly the best thing, because it's basically, this is what you're getting graded on. This is where the point breakdown is. You're gonna get 10 points for your needs statement. You're gonna get 30 points for your project description. You're gonna get maximum of 15 points for your budget. And so that kind of tells you where you need to focus your energy. And if they say, even within the project budget, we wanna, sometimes they'll have a very detailed bulleted list of, you have to, the application clearly describes the project purpose. The application clearly outlines what they clearly, boom, 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 it'll lay it all out. What I like to do is actually take that from the RFP, I copy that and I paste that right into the working Word document, the working Google document, where you're drafting up your narrative answers. And as you're reviewing and developing your answers, you can go through and tick each one off. Like, did I answer that criteria point? Great. Now I can either cross off or highlight it or delete it. And just making sure that you're meeting exactly every single one of the funder's criteria points. Not everyone will provide those, but when they do, it's really helpful. So
I think, most of us are either working on a grant currently, are trying to figure out what grant we can work on, or planning for the next year, right? So I would love to just open up some space. We'll have to figure out how to do it here. I can mute this if we need to, if you guys want to have a comment or something, and you can just unmute yourselves and figure the audio out. But for everyone to kind of engage a little bit, like, do you guys have specific questions, or have you guys hit a roadblock somewhere, or like just have some sort of discussion too that's helpful for you guys as where you are for an organization? Because more than likely, I know Kyle's been in the chat answering some questions that have come up and stuff. So there's some of us here that have maybe never written a grant or written one grant, and there's others of us here who've written like multiple or have years of experience. So Kelsey and I are not the experts on everything grant writing. When I started, I was super grateful to people like Kelsey who had been writing grants for longer than I had. And I was just like, can you help me with this? What does it mean, right? But I still, my last grant that I wrote a few weeks ago, there was this difference between outcomes and outputs. I had never had that before in a grant. So I found the recorded YouTube info session and I watched it all the way through, and at minute 18, their staff had examples of different outputs and outcomes. I watched it 4 times. I rewatched that part 4 times because I was like, I don't get this, right? So you just gotta figure out, sometimes it's helpful to have other people. I wanted to show you guys, this is my printed out copy of the grant that we're working on right now. It's 55 pages. This is the grant application and instruction manual. It's 55 pages of non-linear circles that go round and round and up and down. So anyway, Kelly knows what I'm talking about very well, but this has so many different elements and checklists and worksheets and requirements. It's not even funny. It's crazy business. So anyway, from that to Wells Fargo grant. So I just kind of want to open it up. Lauren.
So in light of your experience working with government, community grants, I think the block one was a federal one versus small foundations, small private businesses. What do you think, based on who we are, is our avenue that would probably be the easiest and most successful?
Yeah, so if you guys couldn't hear very well on Zoom, like, are you asking who we are as in face or who we are as in
No, as a
CDC?
CEDP,
Okay.
because we're all pretty small.
Yeah,
And then, applying for a federal block grant, that sounds pretty enormous to me. And
yeah,
we've never done anything with the federal government,
Federal
but from what you're saying, it probably would not be the best route to go down unless we're Metro Ministry.
yeah, so exactly. So his question is like, what's the best route? Is it private funding, foundation funding, state, federal, like, what's the best route, knowing kind of all of us in the room? And that, yeah, it's a difficult question because as your organization grows and as your capacity grows, you have the capacity to ask for larger and larger grant amounts. And it doesn't always work like this, but more times than not, your larger amounts are coming in with more requirements, okay? Like I said, it's not a hard and fast rule, but the easiest funding for smaller organizations that is non-restricted and able to help organizations build their capacity is going to be individual donors, straight up asking people who have money for their money. That's the easiest. That does not even require a grant application. Sometimes it requires like an executive summary, right? They want to know what you do. Sometimes it requires some time or a tour, spending time with a person.
Thank you note and
It requires a thank you note for sure. A letter thanking them and including your EIN number so that they can write it off as a tax donation, okay? So that's gonna be your easiest as you start going, okay? Then there's the private foundations, which I think are really cool. Like I'll use Cashin as an example. Cashin funded me for 1 year because they were passionate about tenant education. Why? Because they're a landlord, okay? Okay, but they also had some reason to be really passionate about investing in downtown, probably for some political thing they were doing. I have no idea, okay? But I was able to take their money for a year, but I had to leave out that I was like partnership with housing authority. And it was okay, because for the, like she said, with integrity, like for the purpose of funding tenant education, that work has nothing to do with our partnership with the housing authority. Okay, so it was integrity, like I didn't have to add that information for them, okay? But it's not like they're a major funder of mine. They funded us 1 year for, they kind of sought us out. The other one that was like super awesome is, well, as you build relationships with foundations, like the Central Valley Community Foundation, right, is a part and very knowledgeable of all of our work, okay? And so our relationship with Artie and others at the Community Foundation is so valuable, not necessarily because they can write a check or they can fund the work that we're all doing. We know that they are working to do that. But the relationships they also have with other foundations and other funders and individuals in our community that are passionate about the things that we're doing. The connections that can be made are incredible. I literally got a phone call one day from another funder outside of the valley because they had heard about the work that we were doing with a tour that they had done with the Community Foundation, okay? So they called me up and they said, we're interested to learn more about what you're doing. That's the easiest kind of funding ever, right? I didn't have to work for that. The other really great funding was Elliot at the Community Foundation knew the kind of work that we were doing in Lowell, wrote us into a grant, called us up and said, hey, I'm naming you guys in this grant. If we get it, I'll let you know. Hey, we got this grant. I said, great, what do I have to do? Well, you're working with businesses, right? Yep, we are. And I would like to expand that work because I have no staff that can do that. Great, here's some money to expand your work working with businesses in the neighborhood, right? So having partnerships that know what your work is and connected to it is super valuable. So yeah, there might be a point where you need some CDBG funding or CDBG funding makes sense for you. And then you have to kind of weigh the benefits and the outcome costs. Yeah, of like, do we have the staff and stuff?
We have a question from the chat.
Yeah, can you,
How much of your budget should be dependent from grants.
Who asked that?
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's an impossible question, but not all of it. Not all of it.
Please name all of your rich friends.
Yeah. Tell me your rich friends. No, you definitely, if you look at your funding as an organization, if 100% of your funding comes from grants, that's a dangerous place to be. Because if tomorrow, all those grants decide that their priorities are shifting into health, or shifting into education, or shifting just a little bit off of what you're doing, all your grants go away. And some of those grants aren't every day. So as an organization, healthy organizations have diversified the income streams, okay? So maybe there's some grant funding, maybe there's some private donors, maybe there's some foundation money. Well, foundation money and grants are kind of the same thing, but
Fundraiser events.
fundraiser events, like Lowell CDC, we are interested in housing, right? So we now have 2 affordable housing units that are actually, we get income off of that every month, right? So there's some like, I know that's gonna happen. We also have a contract with another organization to provide services. So every month we get a check from that other organization for the services that we provide, okay? So it's always, you're always kind of working for that diversity of funding in your organization, if that makes sense. Yeah. And that's gonna look different for every single person, every single organization, depending on your, yeah. Is there more?
Yeah. Yes, so some people wanted to know do they create their own folder and then copy the templates into it?
Yes.
Or copy the whole folder, so I told them to do that. So I'm demonstrating how to create a folder.
Okay.
Right now on Zoom.
Andy's
And
creating
then-
a folder.
Yeah, and then how to copy templates and put them in the folder.
Okay.
So, and I'm chatting with them in the chat, so they know what I'm doing. So here is the created folder. I know you guys can't see it, but
Okay, do you want to unmute yourself? I'll mute here.
Okay, friends, so you can see that, I'll just talk really slow to give you time. Okay.
I'm muted, so it should be feedback.
I think you just have to turn the volume all the way down there. So you can see that I created a folder here. And then now when I open up a template, so I'm going to choose this master template. When I go into it, I'm going to go to File and say, make a copy. And then it's going to allow me to change the name. So I'm gonna leave the name the same so that I know the difference, but you guys can add your organizational name or whatever you want. And then down here at the bottom, it's gonna let me organize it. So I'm gonna move it from where it's at now. And you guys, actually, please don't move it from here. This is a bad example. So just, I'm like, wait, you might lose it for us, so don't do that. Or actually, I guess you could, because a copy.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess you could. So you could have moved it from there. Or if you go into it, it'll open automatically when you make a copy. You're also able to organize it with this little move folder right here. So once you click that, it's going to bring up your whole drive. And you can go into the folder that you just created. So I said folder here. I'm going to use those little arrows to move it into that folder. And then I'm going to tell it, please move here. Yes, I'm sure. And now when I go back to that folder, it's going to have that copy of the template that I just did. So you could do that to any and all of the information within the workshop folder.
Thank you, Andy. Any other questions that you guys might have, especially Kelsey's written millions of grants, so please use her.
But I'm still learning.
Like like I said, we're not
So-
we're not the experts, meaning like,
Well, Kelsey, how do you like, you know, like you're saying about finding different sources that
know their leanings or what they're looking for, you know, within EMP or writing something that's very community health worker focused. And so we're telling the EMP story, but through that lens, right? And we're telling the next grants on resident development. So we're telling our history through that. So we end up having like, or if they're very church focused, it's very faith based. So we end up having 8 stories of who we are. But, and I'm always like, what did I write? That was a really good, I had a good line in that one. I can't remember where that was, you know?
Yeah.
Like, how do you log, like, say, the history piece? You just save those all in one spot, but here's the different versions, or?
I don't do that. You could, that's definitely an option. What we do is within the folders on the Google Drive of your individual applications that you've submitted, I add a subfolder in each of those of the final submission. And I just go ahead and once you've submitted it, you a lot of times you can download a copy of your complete application. If you can't, then I'll take the running Word document and I'll just save that as a PDF and drop it in there. And the reason I do a PDF is so that it doesn't accidentally get changed or information get deleted later on. But yeah, there's endless possibilities for tailoring your answers to the questions to the specific funder. So even your org history and your organizational background question, you can tailor that to, you can highlight the parts of your organization that align most with that funder and their priorities. Yeah, I don't really have a clear answer.
I'm just trying to remember, I was submitted it to these
Yeah.
folks.
Yeah.
and that's why it's good to have all your grant information in one place, because I can remember I submitted a grant that was more health focused, was to the health department. And it was a partnership grant between us and another organization in the little neighborhood. So we really talked about how we address health outcomes. So if I can remember what year I submitted that, then I can it's right there. Like I know where it's at. So yeah, I mean, it takes a little bit more work to put that all into one document, but that's why it's nice to have it all in one place. That way, whoever's working on whatever grant, they can say yeah.
When you've ever gotten, oh, sorry.
No, keep going, you got that.
Whenever, if you ever when you get rejected, not if ever, when you get rejected, how do you, and so there's like a version of, hey, we just got rejected today for Dollar General for a literacy grant. Okay, 3,000 submissions, we're not gonna give you any feedback. Okay, yeah, they're so big, they're not gonna give us feedback. The Fansler, as an example, there's this local foundation, they support a lot of people like us, can't figure out why the hell they won't give us money. Like, how do you follow up, or how do you, I mean, what are the, what has anybody done to figure out, like, why is somebody not supporting it?
You keep asking, you just keep asking.
Oh, I'm on here
Yeah.
for persistent widow. I keep knocking, I'm still knocking. But the application's the worst, because you have to paper deliver it, envelope, print out 10 copies, it's the worst.
You put it in like a black envelope and then drop it in some.
Yeah, and then there's thing, mailbox fills up, and there's so much.
The grants that there is a feedback, that's the one thing about bigger organizations. So like the state parks, we applied for not this grant, but a different type of funding. Kyle did an entire application to build a park in our city through state funding, okay? That process allowed for feedback after the decisions were made. So we actually had a meeting with somebody there who went through the criteria and told us where we could, in a future application, where we could better our score, what criteria. They couldn't tell us how to change it, right? But there was some feedback. Other private things, sometimes you're not gonna get, or big corporations, you're not gonna get feedback. I literally, there was one grant that I applied for, so CDBG funding. I applied for CDBG funding for 4 years in a row with nothing. Why? city of Fresno had decided that all of their CDBG funding was gonna fund city of Fresno things. In other cities across our nation, CDBG funding goes completely to organizations in the community. Cities don't use it for their own departments. But in Fresno, our Fresno city departments use all of that money for their own budget. And it wasn't going out to any neighborhood organizations. Well, neighborhood organizations had stopped applying for it because it was pointless. You wouldn't get it. And I said no, because city council is not seeing any organizations apply for this. So the argument can be made that our organizations don't need this money. Our city can use this money because our organizations don't need this money. They're not applying for it. And I was like, oh, no. We're here, we're doing the work, I'm applying for it. So I applied for 4 years without getting any of it, went through all of the meetings and the criteria stuff, did all of the community feedback, like, because that process needed to change. And it did. I got some funding 2 years ago.
This may be a little bit, just a question about that process. Is that a decision that's made at the council level? Like, who decides that they get to keep all the CDBG money?
Yeah, city council, the mayor weighs in on that budget, and the HCDC commission. So there's 3 different bodies that make the decision. Ultimately, city council makes the decision. And so HCDC makes their recommendations, the mayor makes their recommendations, and then city council takes all their recommendations.
And does whatever they want.
Okay, Kelly had a question.
Kelsey, I guess for you, 0 to 100% about how many would you say are successful in the grants that you write? And then another question is, would you, in your experience, when you're looking through which grants to apply for, is it kind of get to a point like, if you think you can get it, just do it? Or is it really important to make sure that it's really worth your time? Like based on, how many you've done and how often you do them and your success rate.
Sure. Yeah, for those of you on the call that didn't hear her questions, the first question was 0 to 100%. What's like the success rate of grants that get written? And the second question was, how do you kind of gauge whether it's worth your time and your likelihood to get funded? So I would say first, it differs wildly between foundation and government grants. And if you've been funded by them before, obviously, if you've been funded by them before and it all went well, your chances are much higher. If you've got an existing relationship, even if they've not funded you before, but if you know somebody there, if they know you, if they understand what you're doing, your chances are a lot higher. I don't even know if I can give a percentage rate because it just differs. And there's so many factors that are even way beyond my control, beyond the control of anyone, even at our organization. It has to do with like funding trends and patterns, and obviously things like COVID that pop up and drastically alter the funding world across the planet. So I don't know if I can give a percentage.
Half or greater than half?
Yeah, probably great. Well, are you asking for like for the Lowell CDC or for
whatever your experience?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, more than half. Yeah, definitely more than half. But I don't know. That's such a hard question.
I think the other part of this question is, Kelsey's writing grants for a huge organization. And I think that's kind of up here. They can kind of cast their net, like they have staff capacity to write grants that maybe they're not gonna get. Even like EMP, you said you applied for Dollar General. I don't apply for any of the corporate grants right now. I don't have time for that because I'm more than likely not gonna get them. So I'm only applying for grants that I know I have a pretty good chance at getting because my time is so limited. So I probably have like a 90-something% rate on getting the grants that I applied for, which is amazing, right? I mean, for several years I had a 100% rate. It was awesome, But I applied for money that I knew was more than likely I was gonna get it. I was invited to be there and apply for that money. I didn't get 100% of the money that I applied for. So I asked for more and they grant me less, right? But I think when you're.
Whereas literacy is a perfect example. The Dollar General, Janessa writes it once for each year. And then she applies for 10 organizations, because they're all $1,000, 2,000. They're not, these aren't $100,000 grants. They're just, you know, we're piecing all these things together, you know, so. And the nice thing is that kind of a grant, she saved all the information, and then it's just go through their online system, you know. And some are very simple, some will ask a little bit more. Or like your Rotaries or whatever, it's like, they're actually, what? Because they want receipts and all this stuff. It's not a lot of money and it makes you do a lot of work. It's like somebody else.
Well, like the core initiative grant that we got rejected a few years ago, but El Dorado down the street received it, and yet you look at the demographics, and I think we might have been off a couple percentage points. I wish I would have known that originally.
Yeah.
Because you go through all this work and go, oh, our demographics are a little bit higher. Couldn't someone just tell me so I didn't have to go through all this work?
So, and that's also a critique of a funder. If you're applying for new money or a new program that a funder has, so like CORE was a great example of that. They were just rolling that out. Like CORE wasn't something that they had done for 5 years in a row and they had this great, you know what I mean? So when they got down to like, we can only accept 9 organizations, yours was probably lower, you know, you were 10th or 11th, right? So it's not something that you could have even asked at the very beginning, maybe. So with more established funders or programs that are being funded, they're gonna have like this, there's way specific guidelines. I can go through and almost score myself and know how I'm gonna score on this application, because it's so specific.
This is also the first time they're doing this kind of funding at the colors.
Yeah, but it's very specific. I mean, they have
some,
all their other,
so I can't.
yeah, and their other grant applications are very similar. So they have experience with this amount of grant and the type of grant, yeah. Any other questions on the chat or thoughts or comments?
There's an involved question that you can want to answer directly later, so I can give that to you in a bit, but do you want to mention the grant resources that we added? Is that helpful
Yeah.
for them to have references to what those are?
Yeah, so as you guys start putting together your tracking sheet of all the grants that you could possibly apply for this year or next year, even if you've missed a deadline, stick it on your tracking sheet, because next year you're gonna pull that up and see and check in on it, okay? Andy has done a really great job at starting to collect grants that many of us as CEDP members could qualify for. Andy knows our work really well, and she's spending some time, I think weekly or monthly, searching grant engines. Like that's a whole nother workshop. It's like how to search grant engines, right? Fresno State offers those periodically. If you ever get a chance, go to one of them. They're great.
They stopped.
They stopped during COVID.
Yeah, so I think she said she's gonna do it back up.
Okay, so during COVID, they were like, it's available to everybody from their home computer, which is great. And I didn't take advantage of it. And now they just stopped their.
No, they stopped their subscription.
Altogether.
You can't go to Fresno State right now and get up.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So she said they're gonna restart.
Is it
but-
still at the Fresno Public Libraries? Okay,
And
so,
CDC, yeah.
okay, so it's available some places.
What's it called? It's the grant.
It's a
Foundation directory.
foundation
Oh.
director, yeah. Okay, so Andy is doing some of that work for us, and she started putting together a resource tab of grants, okay? She also emails these out in her weekly newsletters. There's like, hey, check out this grant. If she knows your work well, she will also text you, hey, will this work for you?
Never
So-
got a text.
Wow. People ask me directly, have you seen it? I've just been really good at that baseball, April, yeah, I know.
So anyway, you gotta get better, you gotta get in with Andy really well. And so I won't throw her under the bus, she's doing a great job. But yes, she's put together in our shared file, again, a bunch of grants that we can start with. So you and I don't have to go try and find a foundation directory. Andy is doing a lot of that work for us. So there's a lot of resources there on actual grants. There's also resources there on grant writing resources. So Kelsey and I today are speaking a lot from personal experience. The agenda we put together is our kind of personal stuff. There is a ton of organizations out there that are grant writing gurus. And they will give you information, they will sell you information, they will, like, they've got their own like things on grant writing. So there's YouTube videos, there's articles, there's all that kind of stuff. So Andy's putting that into a document as well. So if you just have time to think about grant writing and become the best grant writer you want to be, do it. I would say don't spend a lot of money on grant workshops though, grant writing workshops. Don't spend the money. Actually,
Right.
just write some grants.
Yeah. I agree.
That's how you're going to become a good grant writer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I agree. And there's actually a free one. I can't vouch for who this is, but I'm gonna send the information to Andy and she can send out to the group. There's actually a free 2-hour Zoom grant writing workshop coming up September 28th, so the week after next. It's sponsored by Senator Ana Caballero's office. I don't know the people that are putting it together, but it's free, so it might be worth tuning into just to see what information and tips you might be able to glean from them. It says they're gonna be covering finding funding opportunities, how to write effective proposals, procedural check-in and follow-up on awarded grants, and then a Q&A session. It doesn't specify who this is tailored to, if it's tailored to smaller nonprofits or big. I'm imagining it'll be a range of people. So yeah, but we'll send that out for what it's worth. Hopefully it's valuable to somebody.
Thank you all for participating. Feel free to shoot Kelsey or I questions and ask each other too, because like I said, we're not the experts here. Kyle's got years and years of all kinds of different grant writing experience. I know, I can't see who all is on the call right now, but I mean, Keith has grant writing experience. That's who has grant writing experience. Who else? Jan has great grant writing experience. Let's see, who else can I call out here? I don't know you all. So I think I will say this about Joe White. I don't know how many grants he's actually gotten, but he and I wrote a grant together. And you know what? I am very simple with my words. I do not have flowery language. I cannot write a great story that just draws you in. I get the facts on the piece of paper. Joe wrote our intro and our executive summary and stuff. And I'm like, dang, he can write all my grants. Like, I'll just do the work and he can write them. So, you know, different people have different skill sets. So that's why a team is great. So I can get facts on the paper and then other people can make it sound really great. So
It can be really helpful too to give your draft of your application to somebody who has super limited knowledge of your organization and get feedback from them too, because they might point out areas of weakness where, oh, can you explain this a little bit more? So that's always a great thing if you have the time to do that.
Cool. Well, there's for those of you in person, there's more snacks and a little bit more coffee, and those of you on Zoom, get your own snacks. You missed out. Did you save the chat? Because I don't have access to the chat.
Yeah.
So you got
I can send that
Okay.
to you as well.
Thank you all so very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.